Thank you very much. Thanks everyone to be here today. I didn't want to miss the chance to talk about a topic that I really love, which is multimodality. But first of all, I will introduce myself too. My name is Carmel Hassan. I studied computer engineering in the University of Granada, and I've been an interaction designer most of my career. Actually, I have had like a lot of job titles, but I guess interaction design is the thing that can defines better what I have done. And in 2015, I founded the feminist Yes We Tech community. Since then, we have made like a lot of events and so. And 7 years ago, we received a lot of hate calling us feminist, but who cares? Now, currently, I'm working at Monoceros Lab, which is a small studio where we are working with speech technologies in Spanish, and we also create multimodal experiences with Alexa devices. So, I'm sure that most of you can recognize these emojis, right? Who hasn't ever used it in a conversation? So, you know that these are the 3 wise monkeys or the 3 mystic apes. And there are many stories trying to explain what is the meaning of this see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And one of these stories says that there is a teacher that ordered the monkeys try not to see, hear, or speak no evil. And while each monkey try to follow this direction by not letting the evil enter on their eyes, mouth, and ears, but they eventually fail, right? And the story is trying to teach people awareness of their surroundings, right? So it's about the importance of having good thoughts and actions despite the difficulties. And while Western societies think that the monkeys are just turning blind eye to bad behavior and looking the other way, and that is okay, for the Japanese culture, the parable suggests just the opposite. It's an attempt to be wise, right? It's acknowledge the responsibility and try to be good of intentions instead of copy evil acts. And I'm sorry for the morality, but to me, when I read about this story, it was like, as a UX designer, I've seen this many times, right? We design interfaces that can see, hear, and speak that might eventually fail, but instead of acknowledging people's need to avoid frustrations, we just look the other way. And I wonder why. But most of it, I wonder, how can we do that better, right? How can we design well-intended interactions? And I think this is important because not all interfaces allow people to experience technology with freedom and control in every context and situation. Interfaces fail. We fail sometimes as designers too. So in this talk is going to be an invitation for everyone to look for a better way to design a better relation between people and machine that can see, hear, and speak. And we will see the flaws, we will see the opportunities, and also how can we use some best practices to design better multimodal interfaces. So as the parable says, let's start acknowledging our responsibilities and trying to identify if it's something wrong, what is not working 100% with unimodal interactions. Anyway, I want to make a disclaimer at this point. I will be talking mostly about graphical, the interactions that you can perform with graphical voice interfaces, mostly. There are many ways of interactions, body movement, pressure, eye gaze. You have a lot of, there are many different UIs that can support those interactions too. But to me, what's interesting about graphical user interfaces is that they have been the norm for many years. And they are not as intuitive as we may think all the time. And I'm not talking about making wrong design decisions. I will be assuming that we all are great designers and developers here, so there's no problem with that. It's more about the inherent issues that we can see when we use screens to communicate information and to receive commands from people. So let's start from the most obvious things, right? Keyboard and mouse. So keyboard is actually a practice skill. It requires time and effort. It requires two coordinated hands. It requires, sometimes you also need to see those hands. And, well, that's something that we have assumed a lot because we have worked for many years with keyboards. But also mouse require precision. Sorry. So mouse require precision and space and attention. So the physical space that you need for both things at the same time is also considerable, even if you think that sometimes in the setup, the person who is interacting with the computer is not just interacting with a machine, it's also interacting with other people. And also the overuse of mouse and keyboards, force the posture and can cause injuries over time. I mean, I can tell. So even though we might think, okay, keyboard and mouse, no. But what about touch, right? So touchable UIs are more approachable for certain kind of population, that's right. But touch obviously requires proximity. It requires, it's also going to force the side. It also requires us to keep some safe areas around interactive controls, and sometimes we need to sacrifice information. And that means also to make this structure more complex, the information architecture more complex, and this increments also the physical effort and the cognitive effort to find the information that you want. These are things that we have assumed because there are a lot of patterns, and that is fine, but it's effort that we have to do, right? And another concern that we can have with some devices that communicates through audio, voice, or sound is the privacy and security. We saw this yesterday in Josephine's workshop, right? That we cannot use, we cannot use voice output sometimes for disclosure personal information, right? So we need to be very sure of the person and identify the right person that we are communicating. And we need to identify if we are in a private space and safe space, or if we are in a public and out-of-control environment. Anyhow, to me, conversational UIs has demonstrated a tremendous value in assistive technologies, and I wanted to make this part of this analysis. So let's continue looking some potential issues of voice-only UIs. One of them is that we have a very short memory. So humans are capable to remember only a few seconds of what was said by the machine. This is going to force us as designers to reduce the amount of words, of options, to be very concise on the messages that we communicate to the people. And this is like when we design in graphical UIs, if we were designing with marquees. So long messages become ephemeral, like tears in the rain. So it's like they're gone in just a few seconds. Another issue, something that we need to be aware of, is that they are hard to discover, right? So we just have this device. You don't know, you don't need to know how to start interacting with it, right? So we have few opportunities of giving affordance to users, and it has to be through the conversation itself. And it cannot be all the time. Screens are great because you can present a lot of information at the same time. Users can scan, can identify what's interesting, and that's it. But with voice, you have to go with the flow of the conversation so they can know what they can do. And again, this is assuming that we are great conversational designers. And another issue, the third issue that I see here is that they don't get a strong accent like mine, for example, right? So sometimes the audio speech recognition systems, they have to be trained, and they depend on the data that have been used to be trained, right? And sometimes that data is not as diverse as we may wish. So the technology is ready, but sometimes it's not ready for everyone. So yes, I think now that we more or less know that evil exists, now how can we avoid it without just looking the other way? To me, the more I read about how humans interact with machines, and the more I read about other technologies and know more about other technologies in my attempt to escape from screens and this economy of attention, the more I find that multimodal experiences is an actual opportunity for designers to create better experiences. So, this is a scene of the movie, The Planet of Apes. Hopefully you have seen this movie, right? I mean, it has like more than 50 years, so no spoilers. This is, in this scene, this is the jury. They are actually inspired by the same parable. And they are in the middle of the trial. They are judging Charlton Heston. I don't know if I pronounced Charlton Heston. So they are judging the human that looks like us. And Dr. Syra says something like this, right? You can sustain all objection, but face the truth. So I'm using the same words. You can sustain all objection, face the truth. Multimodality is the missing link. Okay, maybe she doesn't say multimodality, she say something else, but it is, right? To me, it's multimodality is what I think it could help us here. So first of all, I'm going to quickly define what is multimodality. So you know that we have 5 senses, right? People have, we use these senses to capture information from the world. And from the human perspective interaction, any kind of communication channel that includes multiple input and output devices and invites people to interact with it using any of these senses or any of these input or output could be a multimodal interaction. I'm including here the definition of Cheryl Platts because I think she's probably the best author about this topic at the moment, and I found her book very revealing. And when I was reading this book, I was thinking, I think this is something like cross-device experience, right? Do you remember cross-device when they say it's something continuous? What you start doing on a device, you can continue doing on another device where you left it. But multimodality actually is simultaneous. It's about what you can do doing in a specific mode, using a specific sense or input device, for example. You can do it alternatively with another. The first time that we heard about multimodality, it was in 1982. With this project, it was a demonstration system, put that there. I'm not going to play it, but it's on YouTube. It's really funny. It's just a couple of minutes, and it's really interesting to see the technology at that time. And it was a demonstration system that was processing speech in parallel with manual pointing. So the guy can say, just put that there, right? So indicates where they wanted to move objects and other commands, right? So 40 years ago, technology has changed a lot. All technology, the technology to identify, to recognize body movement, the technology used to recognize the audio, the voice synthesis, everything has changed, the graphics, obviously. But something that remains from this project is the importance of the context, right? So we can know exactly what is that and where is there. And context is going to be key in multimodality. And also something that multimodal experiences has demonstrated is that they are more accessible and more efficient. Multimodality allows alternatives. It's flexible, and as Emily Lado said in her book, Demystifying Disability, normal human function doesn't exist. So we cannot assume that everyone can see, hear, or can speak, or they can click or type with great precision. It depends a lot on the environment, it depends on the people, it depends on the proximity, the noise, the lighting, the mood, the or willingness to finish work before 5 p.m., how good or bad we slept last night. These kind of things, there are many things that can impact on our capabilities. And we, as designers and developers, we need to design technology to amplify those inherent capabilities, not to force us to use one or the other. That was the basic principle of usability, right? So in this context, we can say that being flexible is a way also of being accessible. We can allow now multiple modes of interaction for people with different ages, skill levels, cognitive styles, languages, and temporary illnesses or whatever. So in summary, accommodating the interface to individual preferences is one of the main benefits of multimodality. And the second reason, because I think this is important, is because they are more efficient. People can actually choose, they can actually choose between the mode of interaction that best fits to the task and goal that they have. So this is true. We can speak faster than we can read, and if we can, we can speak faster than we can type, and if we can read faster than we can hear, a system that combines this speech input and return visuals makes a lot of sense, right? And it's also more usable because it adjusts better to different contexts of use. So now we don't need to think only that we have to design for desks and screens and mouse and keyboards and people sit on a desk for 8 hours a day. We can now think on designing for homes, cars, hospitals, restaurants, train stations, even personal devices that don't need to leave the pocket if your hands are busy. So now the question is, we've seen there are some issues, and that for unimodality, and maybe some opportunities for multimodality. So how can we do that, right? How can we design better experiences? So I'll be using I'm going to give you some unsolicited tips, some hints, okay? I will be using just few examples that we can see on a daily basis. The typical a day in a life of a person who can afford all these devices, by the way, but a day in a life of a person. And we will see later on in detail the different tips. So let's imagine that you start in the morning, you wake up in the morning, and you want to check the weather before leaving home. You live on LA. I think you can see it, right? Yeah. So you can ask to an Alexa device with a screen, what's the weather like? Then let's imagine that you want to have some lunch, and you go to a restaurant, one of those restaurants that wants to, plan robots taking jobs away from people. So you have to interact with the screen. And, this is a demo made by SoundHound, so we will see that in a minute. So this is a screen so you can order some food. There is always a peak of dopamine when I hear this bell. I don't know if it's a good or bad dopamine, but OK. So let's continue then. Then let's imagine that the weather app was wrong, and it's not sunny, it's actually raining, and you want to do some in-house workout. OK, so you can interact with a machine like this that is showing you, guidance for your training. That you have to drive back home, and then you enter on your car. You can maybe use an Android Auto to put the directions. If you live in Paris, that's lucky you. If you are 7 hours away from your home, sorry. But yeah, you can use something like this. And let's think that after 7 hours driving, you have still in the mood of doing some cooking, some dinner. And you can use just your tablet device to prepare some tasty recipe. And finally, after cooking and eating, because you cook for 6 people, you are very tired and you want to go to bed, you can interact with a device like this. This is Google Home, I think, and it gives you some insights about your sleeping routine. I love because it's like the same icon all over the place. I don't know. It's reinforcing. Everything is telling you that you have to go to sleep. So, tip number 1, don't compete for attention. Okay? This is the weather app, so imagine that you ask, what's the weather like? And it says something like, in Los Angeles, it will be sunny this weekend, and that's it. But at the same time, it's showing you this information, which is responding also to the question and adding some additional details. So both spoken prompt and display prompt are basically saying the same thing. They are not trying to guide you to a different place. They are not competing. They are not trying to, to say, here's me. And it's great because we can use screens to show more details and voice just to give the exact response to your question. The tip number 2 is that we have to understand how people talk. So over the years, we have made like a lot of effort of understanding how psychological rules work for people who interact with the screens, like what is the Fitts law, the Higgs law, and all these kind of things. But when we design for conversational UIs, we need to start learning more about principles behind UX writing and conversational design. We need to understand how people interact between them, right? Because it's the only way that we can, so they are motivated to interact also with machines. So people interact with people to make connections. So this is what we have. Understanding how this conversation happens is going to be, better for designing also for multimodality. In this example, we can see here that at the left-hand side, well, at the right-hand side, in this case, your left, it's a nice detail because this is showing what the machine is understanding from people's talk, right? So people is talking and they are displaying the words, the transcription of what the people say. And in bold, they are using bold when they identify a command, right? And it's interesting because it's just that space, and it actually represents what we said before. We have shown memory. We don't really remember long things when you are speaking, and these are the amount of information that even when you ask to the machine is what you're capable to retain, right? Here on this side, on my left, we can see that the screen is refreshing as the user is talking, right? So there's also another nice detail that I like that is complex. These are suggestions. It's like secondary information, not really important, but it's something that through voice is very complicated to do. Either you are asked for specific recommendations on the menu of the restaurant, or you just had to find when is the right moment to make those suggestions. And even if you want to make those suggestions, you cannot say more than 4 things, right? You cannot offer more than 4 options, as we saw yesterday in the workshop, right? So this Miller's rule of 7 in graphical UIs is actually a rule of 3 or 4. Okay, so tip number 3, screen and voice has to be synchronized. We can tolerate only 400 milliseconds of delay. So this is, by the way, I know that who participated in the trivial yesterday. Okay, so 400 milliseconds is the answer of one of these questions. Okay, so this is they have to be synchronized. You cannot have a delay on the voice, otherwise it's a kind of glitch, and you don't know where to, to pay attention, right? So this in virtual reality, this is even worse, right? Because if you wear those glasses and you make a movement and the screen is not refreshed at the same time, you can feel even dizzy. It's not as critical here in this case, but but it's also important. And the tip number 4 is that voice is also aesthetic. So we care a lot about aesthetic. It has a usability purpose too, so it makes a lot of sense. And in this case, when we combine graphical UIs with voice, we need to be aware that the voice, the spoken style matters, right? The voice that is used on these devices represents characteristics of human voices. It represents identities, accents, genders. It's something that we cannot just leave and not make that decision. We have to make the decision purposely, right? So we need to make this part of the design process. And Paris 7 hours away. Okay, let's continue. So the tip number 5 is to take the best of each mode. You know that when we design with voice and graphics, obviously they have to be understood independently. If you only pay attention to one or the other, you have to understand what is the information, right? They essentially say the same thing. But it's true that voice is great for short answers, for to give you the information straight away, and screens are great for details. So, you can use another good thing is that voice are very natural when you have to communicate what you intend to do, because you just use your language, something that you have learned many years ago, so you don't need even to think about that. The machine is supposed that it has to understand you, right? So it's great also to send commands and express your intentions. And, well, screen's great for reinforcing with images and details what you have to do. And the last tip that I will be giving to you today is that, indeed, we have to design with privacy and security. These apps collect personal data, even though it's in a private space, that is your home. It could be a shared space also. So we need to be careful about which output mode we use to use this information, to communicate the information. And, well, before closing your eyes and going to bed, I just want to tell you that you shouldn't turn blind eye on bad design, that we can decide to look the other way or acknowledge people's need, and that, for a more accessible and efficient experiences, you can design multimodal interactions, no evil. So thank you very much.